two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast with James Blatch and Mark Dawson from the UK on a Friday. Still sunny. We've still weirdly got the summer in the UK. Climate change?
It is true. It is. It's quite nice outside, but I think it's going to be very cold for us at the end of the week, so I'm led to believe.
So I'm going to Vegas. I don't care.
Oh, there we go.
It's always sunny. So 20 books to 50k conference is coming up in Vegas. And if you're going there, I shall be there representing SPF by myself. I shall bring some, I'll bring the credit card. That's the most important thing. And buy some beers. And I'll bring some pins. And a few people have already emailed me to try and set up some times to sit down together. So I will definitely make myself available. And if I can, I'm doing a session on live video. It might be an opportunity for me to talk to people a bit about SPF and what we have available as well. So I'll try and organise that with Craig. Looking forward to 20 books. I mean, it's a thriving organisation. There's a few of them, and we are also a thriving organisation within the indie space, and we're all friendly with each other. But there's a real energy about the whole 20 books movement. I know you're quite part of it as well. You're going to Bali next year.
Yes, I am. Yeah, no, it's growing fast. I think they're adding. Craig told me the other day how many they're adding, but it's certainly it's over 25,000 people on that Facebook group now. So it's going very well. And yeah, Craig and Michael are good guys, so you'll have fun, I'm sure. Yeah,
and there was an excellent post in the Facebook group from John Logsdon last week, really telling his story. Now, we know John of old because he was, when you first launched Facebook Ads for Authors, Mark, and the free course and then Facebook Ads for Authors, he was one of the first people who suddenly had it change things for him. So he'd been bumbling along, not really quite sure what to do. And he was so ninja, he wrote to us and told us how he was building his mailing list and being paid to do so with a sort of, would you like fries with that offer?
He was, and that was something that we taught him actually. So it was, he was upselling a bundle to people who joined his mailing list and was getting paid something like 60 cents every time he added a subscriber, which is kind of, it's not supposed to work like that. It's supposed to pay. No. Yeah. He was getting paid. So that was really impressive.
It was superb. And he's now the founder of Reader Links, and doing really well in the indie space. I'm looking forward to sitting down with John and having a catch up with him as well. Now we've got some people to welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. These are our new batch of Patreon supporters, people who've gone to patreon.com/SPF podcast. And they have very kindly decided to help us out with the podcast and keep us going and be our supporters. And for that, they get an honourable mention. So I'm going to say a big welcome to Michael Parker from Bognor Regis in West Sussex in the United Kingdom. From Linda Sterling from the Publishing Circle in Vancouver, WA. So that's at Vancouver, Washington. There's a Vancouver in Washington, isn't there? Which is confusingly quite close to Vancouver in Canada. But I've noticed it on the map. T.M. Franklin, who is in Sumner, also in Washington, in the United States, in the state, not the city. Cassandra L. Shaw from Serena in Queensland, Australia. G'day, Cassandra. From Jodie Gibson, who is in Wangaratta in Victoria in Australia. Do you like my pronunciation of that? I have to be careful with that
one.
Not
at all. Carry on.
Chris Kyle from Austin, Texas. Rennie Mallinson, who's from a place that looks like NaNoWriMo, British Columbia, Canada. NaNoWriMo. She's from NaNoWriMo. I don't know how to pronounce that one. NaNaIMO. Do you think that's a Native American name? No, I don't know how to say it. I'm going to give up now. I am also going to welcome Mike McCandless, who thankfully doesn't have a location, so I don't have to get lost in the pronunciation with that. So Michael, Linda, TM, Cassandra, Jodie, Chris, Renee, Mike, thank you very much indeed for joining our thriving group of Patreon supporters. You can go to patreon.com/SPF podcast. You get a whole bunch of stuff, an opportunity to win a premium course. You get a pin. I believe, if you're a gold level subscriber. And we can also reveal, I don't think we're going to reveal who it is at this stage, but we can tell you that we have selected our 4th person to enter the book lab. So that person was selected this week, and I've emailed them. They are squealing with delight at the prospect of being torn apart by our critics, and the critics have already booked their slots with me to give us their feedback. So with that, episode's going to go in December. That'll be the last book lab for this year, and that's been it's been a really great part of this this podcast series. Though, good idea, one of those ideas I had in a moment of genius. Okay, so I've got your microphone. I could just turn your microphone down. I can see you're going to say something.
Well, actually, I was just muting my mic. It's a very large lorry went past the window. But what else do they get for being in our Patreon supporters? What have you forgotten?
They get an opportunity to win the course.
No, you said that. Carry on.
I said that, did I? They get a pin.
You said that.
They get. Go on. What have I forgotten?
Well, they get to see the SPFU monthly webinars. So we've had 2 now. Adam Croft and me. I did the first one on AMS. Adam did Mindset, and we've got a really, really, really good one coming up in November with Tammy Lebrecq, who is really excellent on mailing lists. Not how to build them necessarily, but what you do with them when you have one. She's written a book called Newsletter Ninja, I think it is, which I read. Is very, very good. And she's really affected the way I interact with my mailing list. So I've started. I'm going to be doing bi-weekly posts, and that's a change for me. I wouldn't normally email outside of releases, and I did the first one on Friday in conjunction with a Kindle Countdown deal on the second book in the Milton series, and sold 1,200 copies over the weekend. So that's really fantastic. And again, that's all down to Tammy's advice. So we haven't got a date for that yet, I don't think, or it's mid-November. We'll have sign-up details and all that kind of stuff in the Genius and Mastery groups, and also for Patreon subscribers. But that is well worth. I mean, for the sake of supporting the podcast, that is a really valuable benefit. I'll be taking notes on that one for sure.
Yeah, there's actually 3 webinars up there now, because we've also added the cover design webinar to that selection. So the SPF University. So people who are in the courses and are Patreon subscribers get access to the SPFU webinars. Yeah, is a great thing. I can't see that scheduled, but it is coming up, definitely. We've got lots of good stuff coming up. I've actually done quite a lot of interviews recently, particularly when we're in the States, and I'll do some more in a couple of weeks' time. But we've got Kinga Genetics on Published Drive coming up. We've got Caro Bergin, who talks about wandering the world as a nomadic life as a writer. Erica Ridley is on newsletters as well. So we caught up with Erica in Florida, and she's very good about newsletters, very interesting person as well. Anyway, all that to come. Book Lab 4 currently scheduled for 21st of December. So get onto patreon.com if you want to be a part of that, and also get access to the SPF monthly learning, those webinars. Patreon.com/SPF podcast. Right. What have you been doing this week? We've both been busy this week, and we're getting some course material together.
Yes, yeah, and I had Salisbury Literary Festival on Friday night, which was odd, actually. It was very odd. I may even post into the group, into the Facebook group about this, but I did a session with Andy Maslin, who is another Salisbury author who's also taken both of our courses, and was nominated for the Kindle Storyteller Award this year. So I saw him in London a couple of weeks ago, and then he and I were interviewed by the festival director on Friday night, and we probably had 30 people turn out, which is not. I mean, normally I wouldn't bother with small numbers like that, but I thought it would be. I wanted to support the festival, and also I'm a patron of it as well. So we did that, and it was really good. I had one guy had driven from Southend that evening to see me, and then drove back. So that's probably 8 hours of driving just to see me for a bit. We had someone else came from the Isle of Wight on the way to Bath. He stopped off with his wife and a few other kind of diehard readers who'd read everything that I've written. And we did kind of a book signing afterwards with, I sold a few books. And then there was another session after that with 2 authors called Charles Cummins and Mick Heron, who are both traditionally published espionage writers. I haven't read Nick before, but I have read Charles, and he's a very good writer. And they had probably 200 people in the room, and I was really weird. And then afterwards, they had queues of people. They had tables set up for them. I didn't get a table, and they were signing, a long queue of people buying these books. And I kind of sat at the side waiting so I could collect the books that they didn't sell, and then take them home again. And I felt odd. It was like I had to catch myself. I actually felt jealous. And it's ridiculous. I kind of drove home and spoke to Lucy about it. And if you think under any kind of way of keeping score, I have nothing to complain about.
No.
I'm probably selling more than both of them combined in terms of pure numbers. I'm certainly making more, because just in terms of 70% playing against 10%, I've got readers all around the world, and looking at their ranks and everything, I can beat them on every single measure probably. But at the same time, I still felt envious. And it's weird. I think the way I've come down to it is it's kind of an ingrained inferiority complex that indie authors often still have. Even when you think about it, there's no reason to feel that way. And for me specifically, I could probably, not to say for certain, but I could probably go to London now and say, I've got a new series I'm thinking about writing. Would you like to traditionally publish it? And I think I could get a few offers for that from big publishers. I'm fairly confident I could do that, but I would choose not to do it because I don't want to. I make more money, I have more fun. But at the same time, I'm thinking is it still second best? It's ridiculous, especially coming from me. But I think the reason I'm saying this is because, that kind of inferiority is something that we can all feel. It doesn't really matter how many copies of our books that we sell. It's something that we are all susceptible to. Me, as much as anybody else. So yeah, there you go. It was interesting, and I've been thinking over the weekend.
You think that's changing, will change, or do you think in 10 years' time there'll still be authors who move in those circles and the rest of us?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to move in those circles, but at the same time, I'm thinking that is it is still probably still the case that most people would, even though we know this is not true. We know I'm publishing myself for it as a choice. I don't need to do this myself. I could get a trad deal, but I think there is still, within the community and especially outside the community, there is a suspicion that this is kind of not quite as good as being traditionally published, which, I'm not going to ruin our family friendly rating by saying what I really think about that. But I think there is a bit of that still to go. And, maybe, as time goes by, that will change. But, there you go. It's hearing honesty from me.
Well, we had, if you look at my Twitter account, you'll see that I lost my rag the other night watching, there's a cultural arts program called Newsnight Review. Was it, or Front Row? It was Front Row on BBC Two. Did you see this discussion?
I saw a little bit.
They had a discussion about bookshops, and it was dominated by the traditional people, except Dreda Say Mitchell was there in the discussion. And thank goodness she was there, because they just lived in a world of their own. And when Dreda was talking about how it's almost irrelevant, a bookshop to an indie author, because they take such a huge cut of the book. There's almost nothing left afterwards. So we can do without them, although it'd be lovely, nice thing to have. And then the person next to her, I won't mention it, but you can, I think probably did name dropping in the Twitter, said, he basically said, I think it's all a bit tawdry for writers to think about money, and that's not what I do.
Oh dear. All right. Okay.
I know. And that was the tone of the traditional market when they had somebody making more money than them sitting next to them. And he probably thought he's a better writer than the indies. And maybe he is, but, anyway, it was, I was annoyed watching it, but she was brilliant. And so good to have representation. I think she even name-checked a couple of indie people.
Adam Croft. Yeah, she did.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, look, we're talking about Instagram, and funnily enough, I was thinking about this actually the other day. When you think about why would you go, if a traditional author's talking to me saying, "What's the big thing about indie?" And one of the things they might say is, well, you have to do all your own marketing. And I would say to them, you have to do all your own marketing anyway, mush. Don't expect your traditional public. You could be published by HarperCollins, but they're not going to have a team dedicated to you there the whole time. So actually, the stuff we talk about a lot of the time, like today's episode on Instagram, it's a really good thing for a traditional author to understand this and work the Instagram accounts, etc., and so on. So a lot of this works for both indies and traditionally published people. So we're going to be talking Instagram. We're coming at you from all directions with Instagram. Actually, we have a brand new module which is has been authored and is being edited by me at the moment. It's going to be added to the Advertising for Authors course, which is going to open up for business soon. Actually, I can tell you it's going to be something like the 7th of November, I think. 7th of November, that's going to open its doors for enrollment. And added to that, towards the end of the month, will be Instagram for Authors, a detailed instructional course, step-by-step on how to get yourself set up and make that platform work for you. There's lots you can do now without all the detail you're going to get in that course, and that's what we're talking about in today's episode. It's with Bex Gorsuch, and I must remember we're recording this a week ahead of it, or a few days ahead of it going out, that I did say to Bex, by the time it goes out, I'm going to sort out my Instagram account and start using it properly. So I've got a few days left to do that, so it matches on Friday. Okay, let's hear from Bex. Okay, Bex, welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Great to have you here. And we're going to talk Instagram and quite a few other things and branding. But let's hear a little bit about you first. I think, are you an author yourself, Bex?
I am not. I am a book blogger and Instagram influencer. And I think we are affectionately termed as bookstagrammers. It's like our little corner of Instagram.
Another one of those words we have to
yes.
rinse at or remember, a bookstagrammer. Okay. But you do work with authors and writers, I notice, quite a lot. Why is that?
Yes, I am an Instagram coach for authors and writers, mostly because as I've built my own following, my own brand on Instagram for books, I've noticed this huge gap in the community. And Bookstagram, Instagram for Books, is this huge, powerful force. It's an incredible online community, but it's missing one thing, which is authors. I see it all the time. I'll be wanting to tag an author when I'm helping support their book, and I won't be able to find them, or I'll have the occasional author reach out to me, but they don't quite know where to start in order to really launch their brand on Instagram. So I saw that hole there in the community, and I am just sort of on a mission to get that filled and have authors come over to Instagram where there's this incredible community just waiting for them.
Okay, well, that sounds optimistic and positive for authors. I mean, it is one of those things. I think that authors are primarily writers rather than, the tech people are going to push ahead. And a lot of that's happening at the moment, obviously, with the sort of revolution in publishing. But I know from our audience, it's not necessarily an author's first inclination as to let's discover the new social platform and let me be a big presence on it in the way that it is in some other online industry. So it doesn't surprise me that you found out that authors are a little bit slow in adopting some of the new areas.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting how I actually started on Instagram about 3 years ago. That was when I decided to really go after the book aspect of it. But it's interesting how it's grown so much just over these past few years. A lot of the major publishers are now really invested in Instagram. From my own experience, I've had a lot more interaction with publicists and PR firms, that sort of thing. And these major publishers are all investing time in Instagram now and time in working with influencers like myself. And there are tons of us out there. And it's sort of like a secret door number 3 almost that I think a lot of authors aren't aware of really exists. Lots of authors haven't even heard of the term Bookstagram, which is so surprising to me because of the effect that community is having for book publishing and promoting, really.
Okay, well, let's talk about that effect. Let's start with that, with the why an author should be on the platform. Okay,
we can actually go into a few different facets of that, but I'll try to contain myself a little bit. So I think one of the biggest aspects is connecting with your readers, but not only that, but using that connection to attract new ones and really building genuine connections that lead to fans of your work that are excited to support the sale of your books time and time again. People that are going to be excited to know about you, that are going to be interested in your conversation about your life as an author or a writer. So another big why, I guess, would be, why do you try new things? So not just Instagram, but for instance, like anyone who happens to follow me knows that I don't really eat out. I'm an introvert. I like to stay home and I don't eat out, right? But I tried a restaurant a few weeks ago. So why did I do that? It wasn't because of an ad I saw or a commercial I saw. It was because a friend recommended it to me. And we are always going to trust our friends' recommendations more than we'll ever trust a traditional advertisement. Not that traditional advertisements don't have their place and that they don't work, because they absolutely do. But if you're able to harness something like Instagram, you're able to build a community of friends if you're doing it the right way, where you've built genuine connections with people who are excited to hear from you. So for instance, as an influencer, I think of my online following as a community, because that's really what it is. So why you wouldn't work with influencers and maybe even become an influencer yourself is because when you have a recommendation, for instance, when I post about a book, people know me, they like me, and they trust me, which are all big factors in convincing someone to try something. So let me know if that makes sense, or if I've gone too far on a tangent.
It does. So it's not just about, it's partly about you and your relationship with your readers, but it's also about the community of authors who can support each other. Because if you've got 10 authors in similar genres with big followings each, this personal recommendation, which is something authors do all the time, by the way, with sort of emailing each other, emailing their lists on their friends' behalf and so on, can work equally well in social media platforms. It hasn't worked particularly well in Twitter, but Twitter's not worked very well in quite a lot of areas. But Instagram seems to me like an area that people are finding some traction with.
Yeah, and I think it's because the community is already there. So for example, like on Facebook and Twitter, you kind of have to almost pull teeth to find your community. And on Instagram, it already exists. It's already this huge, really supportive community. And I've worked in other niches of Instagram before professionally, and I can honestly say that nothing has been as supportive or community oriented as the book community has been. And I think that's just because of the nature of readers ourselves, but everyone's excited to connect with everyone else. And it's kind of like, as an author, you just sort of get to walk into that community. So it's not like Facebook and Twitter where you're sort of kind of struggling to find your audience. If you use Instagram the right way, all you have to do is just open the door. And I think there's a lot of power in that. So just sort of join the community.
And in terms of its commercial impact, we are not just talking about feeling good because you're talking to people. There is a commercial benefit that you can demonstrate, you can evidence.
Yeah, definitely. All of my advertisements are through Instagram. After doing Facebook. Of course, I don't have a book to sell, but when I promote my free trainings and things like that, I have much more success through Instagram ads. And I've noticed also a lot of publishers, major publishers, doing book ads now on Instagram. So it would definitely be something I would encourage people to just experiment with.
Okay. You use the paid ads platform as well as organic reach on Instagram.
Yeah, but just to clarify, I only use I never promote an Instagram post. I would actually really discourage that, because Instagram is all about authenticity to a certain extent. So promoted posts won't have the same success that you would on Facebook, where it might be a little more expected. On Instagram, it's a little more like frowned upon to have a promoted post. But if you wanted to do like a story ad where you had a clear call to action, which might be check out this new book, then I think there's definitely a lot of potential to have a lot of click-throughs on that. Okay,
well, it sounds very similar to Mark's advice on don't boost posts on Facebook, but do use the ads platform. Yeah, very similar. Okay, that's interesting the way you talk about Instagram's sort of culture and atmosphere, environment might be the better word, is being quite a type of, I'm trying to avoid using the word hippie, but a slightly more kind of, hey man, don't push things on us. It's a little bit more, less commercially obvious than maybe Facebook is. Because I go onto Facebook expecting to see gadgets I'm going to buy, and there's several on this desk. But Instagram is a more creative area where it's image-led, and people are there because they want to be inspired rather than necessarily buy something. So you do have to be cautious of that, right? That environment, which is what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, and I think you also have to approach it in a more, I don't know if modern is the right word, but in a different way. So I think as we have more content in front of us now than we ever have before. And I think it almost gets a little crowded. So I think the advantage of Instagram, as I was saying before, is this like, know, and trust factor, the ability to break the barrier between the advertisement and the consumer is really, really positive. And that is a stronger connection than just seeing an advertisement a few times.
Okay, well, like, know, and trust factor. Sounds like we can start talking about how to get about building up a process, a presence on Instagram that's going to be effective. I mean, you sent me some notes before the interview, and you said in the notes you started like everybody else did, bumbling around, not really sure what you were doing, but you feel now you've really got a grip on Instagram.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I remember how confusing it was at the start and how lost it seems. And I understand that anytime you're trying anything new like this, there's definitely a lot of trepidation, a lot of fear, and that's completely normal. But my advice is to just sort of push past that, let fear be your friend and recognize that it can be something that can get you to an opportunity that might really change things for you.
Okay, so can we talk about some specific advice for people who maybe, like me and others, have an Instagram account but haven't really got it going?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually do a whole free training where I go in detail on things, but we can absolutely talk about quite a few things. So to use my own profile as an example, what I guess I would want to talk about first is this concept of consistency. And I could probably talk about that for a really long time.
Okay.
But for the sake of this, it's about being, consistency is kind of like a buzzword. I feel like you see it almost everywhere. Like whenever you're searching for social media tips, it's just like consistency, but no one actually talks about what that means. So that's something I like to go into. Like, what does consistency mean in all different facets? So for things like social media, it's about creating expectations for your target audience and then meeting them every time. So for instance, when you look at my profile, it'll be clear immediately to you that I am a person who creates content for book lovers. It's immediate. And that's completely intentional, right? Because I have my target audience, which for me as a book blogger is people who love to read. So if someone scrolls across my profile and they're not interested in books, then they're going to know I'm not right for them. And that's good. I don't want that person. But if they are interested in books, they're going to be like, oh, great. Like maybe this is something, maybe this is someone I want to get to know. And that's how it all starts. So you want to be consistent down the line, but first things first is to be consistent in your profile, like your branding. What are you putting out there? Because when people look at your Instagram profile for the first time, it's kind of like an elevator pitch, your whole thing, right? So you kind of are trying to sell somebody on what you are in a matter of seconds.
At a glance.
At a glance, exactly. So that's when having a consistent theme comes into play. Are you familiar with themes?
Yes, I mean, I know the basics of it, so.
Of Instagram themes. It's just in case if you're listening and you're not sure, an Instagram theme is like an overall aesthetic. It's your color palette. It's your subject matter. That's a big one. It's the overall mood and aesthetic, basically.
Okay, so I've often wondered when you're setting up the account at the beginning, and I think it was the same. I have to think a long way back to setting up my Twitter account, where they asked you what areas of interest that you're interested in, and so on. But I'm not entirely sure where that manifests itself. Do people search Instagram simply on subject matter, or do they, like most of us, find somebody else's as retweeted in the Twitter case or reposted, and you've followed them that way?
What's interesting about Instagram is that it doesn't have a native repost feature like a Facebook share or a Twitter share, or a Twitter retweet, excuse me. So Instagram instead is searched mostly using hashtags. And it also has a fairly complex structure where, for instance, since my profile says, my bio, says book blogger, Instagram knows that I'm interested in books. So when I go to my native search feature, it will recommend a bunch of different people for me, a bunch of different posts, based on a bunch of different factors that, I'm not privy to how their algorithm works, of course. But so it's interesting how they've set it up for your growth naturally. So if you have your consistent profile and you've defined yourself really well, then Instagram is aware of that, and it will help you find others and help others find you. I think a lot of people also misuse hashtags, which is a big part of the search function on Instagram. And I think there's a lot of confusion about how to properly use hashtags.
Okay, well, should we talk about hashtags in a minute? Because that is an interesting area, and I think you're right, it does get misused. But just sticking with consistency, so I can hear in my mind authors listening to this thinking, I'm historical military fiction, and I can fill any social media post with ad nauseum pictures of 1960s jets, and that works really well, and I'm already working on Pinterest with that. But people who write, for instance, billionaire romance books, as a genre I often quote, because it does quite well, but it's also quite niche. What do they post? They post to remain consistent and get a valuable audience, a relevant audience. Do they post about them as writers? Do they post pictures of the type of, the Brad Pitt type imagery or whatever that they think their readers might be interested in? How do they find content and remain consistent?
I think it's more about inserting yourself in the book community and sort of following those trends. So instead of thinking about it like Pinterest, which is another fantastic resource, but on Pinterest, you're posting tons of other images. On Instagram, it should be your own content that's designed in a way, for instance, like my account, I'm sure you took a quick glance at it before we started, which has what we call flat lays. It's about the books I'm reading, just anything book related in general, right? So as an author, I would really recommend that you insert yourself in the book community by posting about what the book community is interested in, which is books. So that would be books that inspire you, books that you're reading, and then of course your work as well. So I think it's a balance between being an author and being a reader, and putting yourself in front of both of those audiences. Okay,
so that's an interesting way of putting it. So you don't see yourself as a leader of a community, you see yourself as part of the community, and that you think that'll so that you're enjoying seeing the things that your readers see alongside them, rather than you sitting there as an author saying, and now this is about me writing today, I'm writing tomorrow. So I can feel that community building in a more realistic way. And some people are very good at this naturally, and other people have to really think about it.
And you want it to be a balance. It's not like you want to pretend you're not an author or anything. It's just that you want to have value for your audience on a social platform. So it needs to be more than an advertisement. Again, as we were talking before about thinking about it in more of a modern way, it's about you as an author in a more personal sense. So I think we underestimate a lot of times when you're a content creator, like as an author, I think you start to forget the boundary that exists between you and your audience. I'd love to give you an example of that if I could.
Mm-hmm.
Using Mary Kubica, who is a mystery thriller author. And this was at the beginning of Instagram, where I had picked up a Mary Kubica novel at a library book sale for like $1. Okay, so I wasn't super invested in it. It was just something I picked up and happened to read. But I took a picture of that book, which I think was The Good Girl. And Mary Kubica commented on it. And as a reader and a fan of somebody's work, I got so excited.
Well, that's going to make you a fan of somebody, isn't it?
Exactly. Because you forget, I think, when you're a content creator, that boundary exists because you're on the other side of it. You forget almost how exciting it can be to have even a few words from someone whose work you've admired. So I think social media is a way to really break that barrier. And then you're turning your readers into fans. And it's absolutely worked. I've talked to other people that's happened to. And even now, I bug Mary Kubica's publicist every time she has a book coming out because I'm just like, and that's all it took was a comment from her. And I was so excited. And I'm still get excited about her work.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Okay, should we get into the weeds a little bit and then talk about some of the technical side of things? So you mentioned hashtags, and let's talk about frequency of posting as well, things like that. So let's start with frequency. How often should people be posting to be a part of the Instagram community?
Yeah, sure. So I post every single day. I can't remember the last day I went without posting, but that doesn't mean that that's what you have to do. So on the low side of things, I would say post 3 to 5 times a week. If you need to take a few days off, if you just don't have that much content, it's totally fine. Of course, you won't grow as quickly, but it's sort of enough to get you by, to be present in the community. And then on the other end of that, some people post what I think is too much. So I think posting 3 times a day, which some people do, is exhausting not only on you for having to create that much content, but it can get exhausting for your audience as well, because it almost becomes like spam behavior, if that makes sense, because it's just like constant. You're popping up in their feed. So you want to be there. You want to show up in the community, of course, but you don't want to disappear on one end and you don't want to overpost on the other. So I would say the sweet spot is definitely 5 to 7 days a week.
Okay. That sounds doable for most people.
And I think once you get in the rhythm of it, it becomes a lot easier. In my coaching, I talk about learning how to plan your posts and have everything set out ahead of time so that you can make a lot of content in a few hours and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. You just sort of dedicate a little time in the beginning and then you can post for a few weeks without having that pressure of what am I going to post online and feeling like worrying about it.
And can you schedule posts within Instagram itself, or do you have to use a plugin or a third party?
You have to use a third party. So I use an app called the Preview app, which allows you to grid out your photos. And there is a timer in there, but no app is allowed to post for you on Instagram. So any app that says like scheduling, a schedule timer, it will give you a little alert, but it cannot post for you. Instagram doesn't allow it at the time, for now. Maybe it will one day. So you would just be setting it up and then posting it yourself whenever that time allows. But the Preview app, and there's a few others like it, will allow you to draft out a caption and have hashtag groups. Everything is ready to go so that, as I said, if you spend a little time planning, it would literally take you 10 seconds to post on day of.
Sounds another part of why them trying to keep Instagram feeling different from the other social media platforms. We should say, of course, it's owned by Facebook, right? Instagram.
Yes.
But there's obviously
things are definitely changing.
Yeah, but there's obviously a glass wall in the company, and Instagram feels different from Facebook, and it sounds to me like they're trying to keep it that way. It should be a sensible thing to do rather than homogenize them, which should be no good. Okay, so that's interesting. Interesting on frequency, and we should also say for people not on the platform or not particularly familiar with it, it is an image-led platform, right? Each post is an image.
Yes. So I actually have worked, one of my mentor students at the beginning, she didn't have an Instagram account at all. And she sort of took a chance on me and Instagram. And she said the exact same thing. She said she didn't understand how a writer, someone who deals primarily in words, could be successful on an account on a platform that's so visual. But I think, of course, photography is important. And I think that it's going to almost be like learning to type, that you should educate yourself on how to take a decent photograph, because that's just the world we're living in. It's a visual world. And I think if you can invest a little bit of time and a little bit of effort into just learning even simple photography basics, it can go a long way. But that's not to say that the written word on Instagram isn't equally important, because it is. And I think a lot of people underestimate that. So if you have great photos, but you're not posting engaging captions and you're not using the written word to share a little bit about yourself, to interact with your audience, to engage with the community, then you're really only doing half the battle. So your captions are a big part of what can make you successful or unsuccessful on Instagram. And as authors and writers, you guys already have an advantage in that camp.
The photograph thing is interesting, and it's never, you say you've got to be good at photography. I mean, I've always been interested in photography, but it's never been easier to be a good photographer than it is today. The technology involved in these is my gym membership card. So I'm going to demonstrate this by doing a nice little Instagram post for this interview. So I put it onto the square photography mode, and I'm now going to go and use the filters. So people who aren't familiar with Instagram, most people have played with it a bit, I think, will learn very quickly that, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see some of this. So there's the picture, and then you get to apply various filters to it, which gives it what we call a shallow depth of field and cranks up the contrast and just makes it look artistic, for want of a better word. We could go with a nice black and white one. That's quite nice there, doesn't it? And this is, a little while ago, not that long ago, this was quite complicated to do all this in Photoshop, and you had to have a good composition eye. But people now, John Dyer, for instance, who I don't let near my big cameras, he's our colleague here at SPF because he breaks things, is a fantastic photographer, and his Instagram account is really worth following. I'll dig out his, he's just been on holiday in Croatia as I speak, and I'm keen to look at, there we go. So that's probably the one I'm going to go with on this. Doesn't that look like somebody spent some time on that photograph rather than the 35 seconds whilst I've been having a conversation that I've had now?
Yeah, it's absolutely doable. I've had a lot of people ask me if it's possible to have a successful Instagram with just an iPhone or just your smartphone. And yes, that's how most people do it.
Yeah.
Is just their iPhones.
Yeah. And I've got big cameras everywhere, but I would only ever use the iPhone, or only ever need to use it for Instagram and my other posts. In fact, I sneakily use the Instagram app to create photographs for my Facebook feed as well, because I love the look of them.
Yeah.
And once you've created them in Instagram, they save back to your photos with the new filters on them, so you can then use them elsewhere as well, which I find is really useful.
Yeah. And there's tons of apps like Afterlight, Snapseed, VSCO, tons of apps out there that have even more options than just Instagram natively. That's what a lot of like fashion bloggers and a little more aesthetic type bloggers end up using, because there's just so much more options. So it can be done. It absolutely can be done. And it's really easy to learn. Quick few YouTube searches and you will be way better off in 10 minutes than you would have thought.
And it's fun, right? And you don't have to put yourself in it. Some people don't want to be in photographs on social media, and I think that's absolutely fine. Honestly, taking a picture of a bumblebee in your garden looks amazing on Instagram, and people love that. People love to see it. So if you do get bumblebees, the poor bumblebee dying out. Okay, so let's keep on. You mentioned hashtags and people misuse them. Now, it's a little bugbear of mine, and I don't know what your view on this is, whether it's the opposite, but I'm not a great fan of long lists of hashtags, and you see it on a lot of platforms. I've been shopping today, hashtag bought some, hashtag I'm winning, hashtag this, hashtag that, and I'm bored of the hashtags at this point. But you do, I'm probably being rude about some friends who do that now, but that's for me irritating. Is it the right or wrong thing to do?
I think on platforms like Facebook, when people use hashtags, I get really annoyed because it's not necessary and people don't use it that way. But on Instagram, it's a huge part of what you need to do in order to get your posts seen. So I use almost the full 30. That's what you get. That's your limit on Instagram at the moment is 30 hashtags. So I use 23 to 27 every single time, and you'll see it on every single one of my posts. So I've just
criticized you as being one of the people who use.
You're allowed.
But it's I have to apologise. I mean, it's funny that it really sort of shocks me that you're saying that's the right thing to do. Is that because of the search function and the visibility you get from the post as a result of that?
Yeah, let me explain. So on Instagram, Well, I think what a lot of people are doing wrong is that they're using the wrong hashtags.
Okay.
So they'll sort of make up a hashtag, which really drives me crazy. You don't want to be just making up a random hashtag because no one's looking for it. So, for instance, sometimes I'll see people make really long, random, complicated hashtags. Like if they had a dog, they would be like, hashtag Buttercup is cute today. Hashtag my dog Buttercup is awesome. Like no one is searching for that hashtag, so it doesn't make any sense for you to be using it. But what you want to do is think of hashtags as almost like file folders. So if you have a file folder, if you have a file folder jammed way back in the back of that cabinet and there's like 2 documents in it, 2 posts, then you know that no one's checking that file folder. No one's looking at it. So no one's going to see it if you add your own post or your own document to it, right? On the other end, if you have a hashtag that is so full of files, like everyone's checking it, it's on there all the time, a lot of people are adding to it, then you might have gone too far in the other direction and no one's ever going to be able to find it because there's so many. So you want to find hashtags that have a more agreeable range of likes. So probably nothing lower than 10 or 20,000 posts under it and nothing more than a couple million, and how, especially when you're starting out.
And how do you find these? You simply tap on a hashtag and it comes up with the results. It should tell you at that point how many postings there are with that hashtag?
Yes. So if you like hashtag Bookstagram is a big one. I still use that one. That is one that has millions of posts. So you'll see a great just cross-section of the book community on Instagram with that. And once you type that in, it's going to give you suggested hashtags right at the top. So Bookstagram, Bibliophile, Book Blogger, like the list goes on and on. And then there's different aesthetics hashtags like that people create that get a big following behind them, like Post It for the Aesthetic on Wednesdays where we wear pink. I think that's one. A lot of pink. Pink's very in on Instagram right now for some reason.
Okay.
But so that's sort of how you find them. It's not as convenient as that there's just like a list of hashtags waiting. But if you start with one, start with Bookstagram, start with hashtag book blogger, then you'll be able to find other ones that will relate to that subject. And if you find a post that you really like, check the hashtags that they're using and use some of them yourself.
Well, this is a revelation to me. There was I thinking this is people who don't understand how hashtags work, and they're the ones who understand how hashtags work, and I'm the one who doesn't, at least when it comes to Instagram.
Well, it depends on what you're doing too. Like, because as I said on Facebook, I really don't think it's necessary at all. And then to me as well, it can be really irritating. But on Instagram, if you're using only 2 or 3 hashtags and they're not really great hashtags that don't really relate to what the subject of your post is, then you're just limiting yourself. Some people, like some big accounts, will only use a couple of hashtags. But I think when you're really trying to grow and you're really starting out and you don't have that audience base, that's the way to get yourself seen. Now, I would suggest when you're writing a caption and you include your hashtags at the end is separate it from your caption. That's what I do every time. So I have my line breaks and then like 3 periods on a line so that they know content's over.
Okay.
This is just sort of like a file system.
You're not supposed to be reading that would make it a bit more tolerable for me in my convey. And just on the point you say about it doesn't work on Facebook, where people do kind of just invent hashtags to describe their day type thing, as a reason perhaps not to cross post between the 2 platforms?
I think it really depends on your audiences, but most people's audiences aren't following you on every single platform. That's a pretty small group that's doing that. So I don't think that they would probably mind too much, but I also don't think that you should just duplicate things everywhere because that does frustrate people. But if you're talking about specifically, like if you posted something on Instagram and then you just clicked the share to Facebook option and then all your hashtags are going to come with it, then I would say go in and delete the hashtags.
Avoid that.
For your
okay.
Facebook post.
So you can post the same content, but do it as a Facebook orientated post and an Instagram orientated post. Okay, good. All right. So hashtags in finding them. And so, for instance, this post, which I shall do after the broadcast. In fact, if I'm clever, I'll put a calendar note to do it at the time that the interview goes out. So it's contemporary then rather than do it now, which is, I'm not sure when the interview is going to go out. But this is obviously the slightly crazy world that we live in with podcasting. But I'll try and do it contemporaneously. So Bookstagram sounds like a good hashtag for this. What other hashtags should I be including in a post like this? If we laughingly call me an author for the purposes of this.
Writers of Instagram, writers of IG, author life. You know what? Let's look up some.
Okay, let's do this live.
Yeah, let's just go for it.
Of IG. Okay.
There's one called Write, Women Who Write, Novel Writing, Am Writing, Writers of Bookstagram. That's probably a good one.
Okay.
Writer's Life, Writers Community, Authors of Instagram. And that's all from just one search. And then I clicked on someone's post, which was successful, and I saw which ones they were using.
Okay. All right. So I shall do a bit of digging on that as well. And of course, I've got to think about what, if I'm doing this for my account, and this is people listening to this need to think about their own account, what do you want to achieve through it? What sort of relevancy do you want with your audience? So in my case, it might be, more to do with SPF and podcasting that I want to focus on rather than writing. And so, yeah. But anyway, for this post, we'll do something that's writing orientated. Good. Okay. Well, look, we've got a few minutes left. I just wanted to quickly talk about the paid ads platform, and then we'll talk about the course. I know you've got an offer for people. So the paid ads platform. So Mark is a big advocate of paid advertising for authors to really move their careers forward. It's a bit more advanced level, but he's and living proof of the fact that these platforms work and can drive sales and create careers. Instagram is an area that's still new to us, and we're yet to develop a really good set of teaching on it for Instagram. But this is a platform you're actively using.
Yes, for supporting my course and that sort of nature. Again, I never promote a post. So I think you'll have more success with Instagram ads in stories because it's more native for people to swipe up. They're used to that feature there, and it doesn't feel quite as intrusive. And of course, just like with Facebook, you want it to look more native, like it's meant to be there, and not like, a megaphone. This is an advertisement. So what I did was, with my most successful ad, was I made it as if I was about to do an Instagram story. So I didn't have any extra crazy features. It just looked like a normal story someone had posted, but with quick call to action and, information on what it was that was like quick and concise. But it looked like all the text features I made natively in Instagram. So it could have just been anyone's Instagram story. And I think that is probably what made it more, got me more click-throughs on that. So I think on the feed, the grid advertisements, videos tend to do better. But again, I think when people are scrolling through Instagram on the grid and they have this idea in their mind of what Instagram is, I think that people are still really hesitant to click through on an Instagram ad in the feed. But I think on stories, where if you have over 10,000 followers like I do, you can add click-through links in your Instagram stories natively. So that's already the place where people are used to that feature. So you're more likely to have people saying, oh, okay, they know what to do, and they just swipe up.
Okay. And do you think it's possible for authors to be successful using the paid Instagram ads platform, bearing in mind books are a low value item? I mean, they're hugely valuable, but low value in terms of the dollar that you charge for them.
Yeah, I completely understand. I think that is just going to take sheer experimentation. I know Facebook ads themselves have gotten more expensive as time has gone by, of course, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with Instagram. But I think it's absolutely worth testing out a few Instagram story ads and seeing how it goes. Make them quick, make them seem native, make it a little more fluid. But I definitely think it'll be really interesting to see where that goes as far as books, because as you said, advertising fees are expensive and you need to have a product that can handle your advertising fees. So it would be interesting to see some results on that for sure. Yeah. But I have seen major publishers experimenting with that. So I think we'll see more and more as we go on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's an area we're definitely getting into. So we'll report back when we have some results. Okay.
Yeah, I would love to hear it.
Yeah. So in our last few minutes, Bex, let's talk about this course. You've got a free 3-part course on. Just explain how that, what the content is.
Yeah, sure. So I actually set up a 3 days to a better Instagram challenge. It's going to teach you what you're doing wrong as far as posting now, how you can fix it. It's going to talk you step by step through what you need to create a winning profile. It's going to talk about consistency as a concept and how crucial that is for success on social media. And I made them all I really believe in actionable, concise videos, so they're all really quick. I know everyone has busy schedules. The first 2 are going to take you 15 minutes or less. So you just sign up, and then every day for the next 3 days, they'll get an email from me with a quick video to watch, a little bonus worksheet on each day that they can work through. And on the other side, they'll probably have a whole different idea of how they can really start using Instagram to build their brand and support the sale of their books.
If people go to selfpublishingformula.com/Instagram challenge, all one word, Instagram challenge, and then we'll send out the link to you and you can go off and get that training.
Awesome.
Superb.
Thank you. I hope people get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. It looks like a really good thing. As you say, you've taken account of the fact that people have a lot to do the whole time, and this does feel, every time we talk about a new platform, I know that some people listening are, I've got another platform to learn, but this Instagram does feel, we've mentioned it several times in the interview, it's got a fresh, enjoyable, lovely feel to it as a social media platform. I really like it, and as I say, my colleague John Dyer is a real hero on Instagram. He's loves the visual medium, and it's an enjoyable social media channel, right?
Yeah. It's an app that I think, especially in the book community, that is just a very welcoming place. It's a very happy place to be. It's a nice place to invest some of your time, and that you can get a lot out of it as far as turning your readers into fans, learning to work with influencers. I think there's a lot of potential in it for authors, and I'd love to see more people taking advantage of it.
Superb. Okay. We got there. We had a couple of technical issues right at the beginning before we pressed record, didn't we, Bex? And you just briefly sounded like a Dalek in the middle of that sentence, but we got the gist of it. And somewhere between here and Washington DC, the Daleks are invading, but we got there, and that's brilliant. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. It's been really interesting, and I've learned huge amounts, not just about hashtags, but about the channel as well. And each time I talk about Instagram, I sort of pledge to myself I'm going to be more active on it. So we'll see what happens this time.
I hope so. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad we got to have this conversation.
Thank you, Bex. Appreciate it. There we go. So let me just remind you, I think I came up with this in the interview, I'll have to check afterwards, but the landing page to get involved in that challenge is selfpublishingformula.com/Instagram challenge, all one word, and then we'll send you in the right direction to join Bex Gorsuch's challenge. So that's selfpublishingformula.com/Instagram challenge. So I learnt loads there, and I think Instagram is the least well understood of the platforms. I think people understand Facebook because we all, certainly our generation, use it quite a lot. I think people understand Twitter. They either don't like it or do like it and use it. And I think most of us understand enough to know that it's actually commercially quite difficult to make a lot of progress and traction on Twitter. But Instagram's the one I know the least about, to be quite honest. And I learned a lot in that interview. I learned more about hashtags than I thought I would ever need to know in one interview. I know Lucy is an Instagram person in your household. Are you an Instagram person?
No, not really. She does the Instagram accounts for both SPF and me as well. So she's in charge of both of those. And I know she told me the other day she's very pleased that we got to 1,000 fans, or I'm not even sure what they're called on Instagram, followers on Instagram. So she was pleased with that for SPF. And yeah, she does all of that for me as well. So yeah, I agree. It's a valuable platform. But from my perspective, my focus is on Facebook. That's kind of where I'm most comfortable. But Instagram is up and coming, definitely.
Good. Okay. And I say we're coming at you on all fronts on this. We have a book which has been is in the last stage of publication. Stuart Bache is going to provide the cover this week. He's going to get it to me by Wednesday. He's fantastic to us, Stuart, because I know he's such a busy guy. Stuart also, I don't know if I shouldn't say this or not, I'm going to say it anyway, just to put pressure on him. He's told me he's going to do NaNoWriMo. Now, he's a fantastically busy person, so that's quite a commitment from him. But I can tell from the conversations I have with Stuart, he is desperate to get writing. He's surrounded by writers. He loves the trade. He loves reading, and he thinks he wants to be like I do. He wants to be a writer. So now I've made that public without his permission. He's committed to NaNoWriMo. So just tell him Mark said it if anyone asks. So we're getting the cover on Wednesday, and you can go to this page to get the Instagram book, which is completely free. You can download it completely for free if you go to selfpublishingformula.com/IGbook. I must make a note of this landing page before we finish the interview, because I have to go off and create it. Now, it should be there, I would think, by the middle of the week after, if it's not there by Friday. But if you go to that landing page, you'll get an email and you'll get sent the book as soon as it's there. Good. Excellent. Well, that was a busy episode. You've learned about Instagram, so I expect to see you improve in that area.
I'll just hand that off to my resident expert.
Yeah, you've got a team now. Team Milton. Team Dawson, Milton. Are you riding the microphone like a DJ now?
Well, it's sitting here because you were having trouble with your levels earlier, so I thought I'd put it right in front of my mouth so you have no excuses. Yeah,
you just look like you're in Ibiza now. Good. Okay, excellent. Have a great week. We're going to be back. We're going to be recording a masterclass. Now, the masterclass episodes, I can tell you at a glance of looking at the downloads, are the spike episodes for the podcast. So when you do a masterclass, people tune in and listen. So we're recording one next week. And what is the subject going to be, Mark?
We'll do something on Amazon ads. So some interesting ideas for making Amazon ads work a bit better. Because I'm using them quite a lot at the moment, and they're going really well.
Excellent. So we're going to be recording that next week, and that is going to go out on November the 9th. So very soon indeed. Good. Thank you so much indeed for listening and being with us today. We hope you have a really brilliant week reading, writing, and selling your books. I'm adding reading in because you've got to read to be a good writer. And until then, we're going to say goodbye. Goodbye. You're going to say goodbye?
Bye.
Smooth.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.